What is going on, Crimson Tide fans? Chris Daughtry here with the Alabama Football Report by Chat Sports. Coming up on today's show, we're going to be recapping the really good month of June that Alabama had on the recruiting trail. We'll break down all the commitments. We'll talk about who will be committing to Alabama next, some guys that they've been predicted. We'll also talk about some notable misses because it's not all been sunshine and rainbows here. Alabama has also missed on a couple players, but it's not the biggest deal at the end of the day. And then at the end of today's show, Paul Finebaum kind of said some stuff yesterday to Greg McElroy, and wanted to touch on that because I thought it might have been taken out of context, because when I read the original headline yesterday, I got fired up here in the office, started talking a lot of shit about Paul Finebaum, and then Tom was like kind of cooling me down, so I wanted to talk about it, kind of from Tom's perspective as well. He kind of framed it in a little bit of a different way, but all of that is coming up here on today's video. Before we get into that, though, I want to ask you guys, make sure you guys turn those notifications on for me right now. Go back to where you first subscribed, right on the main page here at the channel. Hit that bell icon. Go down there, change it from personalized to all. So every single time Alabama gets a commitment, we're going to post a video. We're going to post a short or a community post. Something will be posted here on the channel, so do not miss out. When Alabama gets a commitment, we have got you guys covered. But don't miss out. Make sure you guys turn those notifications on for me right now. All right, first up, going to break down just the really, really incredible month of June that Alabama had here on the recruiting trail. First up, you had Sam Utu, ended up committing there on June 6th. I'll move over so you guys can see the dates there. And then Jett Thomalla ends up committing on June 17th. J.J. Finch, Javari Barnett ends up committing, flipping from Illinois, and then Rihyael Kelley as well. So you got a couple 4 stars there, and then the 3 stars ended up committing, and a lot of people started freaking out. Oh, my God, Alabama's only recruiting 3 stars. Well, then after that, things really started to pick up as well. And I think you got to remember always, too, is, with the revenue sharing and NIL and everything right now, you have to take that into consideration. You can't just pile up 4- and 5-star recruits. You're not going to be able to afford it. No team in the country is going to be able to afford that. So you end up on the 26th, I believe that was last Thursday, you get Mack Sutter, you get E.J. Crowell, the 5-star running back. I'm just going to start calling him a 5-star because On3's got him as a 5-star. 247 Sports has him ranked at number 33 overall, which is technically a 4-star. So I'm just going to say F it, call him a 5-star from now on. Both of those guys committed on the same day. And then you go back to the 3-star Zay Hall commits the very next day at that linebacker spot. And then the big one, Xavier Griffin ended up committing 2 days ago. And then Owen Cable ends up committing yesterday. So Alabama also has that wide receiver, the first wide receiver anyways, in the recruiting class. So what does that bring up next? Well, today, Alabama could possibly get Brian Williams Jr. as well at that wide receiver spot. He's been a guy that's been predicted to Alabama for a while now. Same with Cederian Morgan, 5-star wide receiver, number 1 player out of the state of Alabama, is going to be committing tomorrow as well. So you got an opportunity here today and tomorrow to wrap up your wide receiver recruiting class. They're not going to take a ton of guys in this class. What's really fun about Cederian Morgan as well is I think last week he was talking to, he was either Rivals or 247, one or the other. He was telling them, they asked him, hey, who's your favorite wide receiver? Who do you model your game after? Julio Jones was the wide receiver that he ended up picking there. And look, Brian Williams Jr., sure, a little bit of a lower ranked guy, but Alabama's coaching staff really liked what they saw during the evaluation process. So that's just another trust the process, trust the coaching staff when it comes to him there. And, man, you look at this Alabama wide receiver room and you just, think about what you're going to be adding next year. And Owen Cable, guy that ran a 4.440 during his, camp at Alabama. And then you're adding possibly 5-star wide receiver Cederian Morgan, possibly Brian Williams Jr. as well. Jeremy Bernard, if I'm not mistaken, is the only guy who would be out of eligibility for Alabama going into next season. You're still going to have Ryan Williams, probably still going to have Isaiah Horton, Jalen Hale, all those other guys as well. Man, this wide receiver core is going to be really, really good for at least a few years. Now, you also have to take into consideration you have the transfer portal and things like that, but with the culture that this coaching staff is building right now, doesn't seem like there's going to be a lot of guys hitting the transfer portal for the years to come. Obviously, knock on wood, don't want to jump the gun too much there, but, man, there's just a lot of talent, and I love the vibe that this Alabama coaching staff is really continuing to have now going into year two, after Nick Saban retires. So let me know down in the comment section. This should really be everybody who watches this video here today. If you guys want Cederian Morgan, the 5-star wide receiver, #1 player out of the state of Alabama, if you want him to commit to Alabama's 2026 recruiting class, go ahead and spam me down in the comment section at the big comment, actually, of today's video. Now, I mentioned to you guys, it's not been all sunshine and rainbows. There's definitely been some guys that Alabama has wanted to get in this class that they haven't been, or that they weren't able to land, commitments from anyways. You got Titan Davis, the 4-star defensive lineman, ended up committing to Michigan. Malachi Lee, offensive lineman, also commits to Michigan there. 5-star safety Jett Washington ends up committing to Oregon. Edge rusher Kamari Brooks ends up going to Georgia. Ohio State also gets Sincere Johnson, that linebacker target that you were going after. And then Roman Boss, #1 player out of the state of Minnesota. He's definitely going to be their pride and joy there as the face of Minnesota's class. So not really the biggest surprise there. He ends up staying at home. Same with Sincere Johnson. Same with Kamari Brooks as well. All those guys are from those states. So not the biggest surprises there, but those are definitely some players as well that Alabama would have liked to have in their class. But, man, when you're considering what they have and what they could possibly get here in the near future, Alabama's set up really, really nice in this 2026 recruiting cycle. So what's next for Alabama? They're still trying to go after one more quarterback target. We're going to talk about that quarterback target here in just a second. They're also targeting a couple more defensive linemen. Anthony Jones from Alabama as well. Nolan Wilson coming up here not too long. He's going to be committing here on July 4th as well. And then you also have Javari Edwards, 5-star safety, who they're going after as well. So still, in the next couple of days, it seems like they've been going on this crazy run here in the last 2 weeks. Well, the run's not over yet. We're going to talk about those players here in just a second. But first, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Fanatics. You guys can get $5 off this Alabama Truckers hat today just by going over to chatsports.com/Bama Trucker. I'll put that link down in the comment section and the description of today's video. All right, the quarterback target that I was talking about is Taden Kawa. We've been talking about him. We've been talking about Matt Ponatoski a little bit. Seems like Matt Ponatoski is probably going to end up landing at Kentucky if he doesn't end up going to the MLB draft at the end of the day. But look, man, Taden Kawa, he's a guy that this coaching staff does like a lot. He's a little bit lower ranked, so he's going to cost a little bit less. And, man, look at that size as well. 6'5", 235 pounds is now what he is listed at. This is what Steve Wiltfong said, kind of giving an update about Taden Kawa and where he sits with his recruitment. He said, talking to several sources since then, it looks like the Crimson Tide are closing in on a commitment. Final NIL conversations are happening as Kalen DeBoer and this staff work to add a second quarterback to the fold. Kawa has Alabama setting the pace over BYU and Boise State. He took his official visit the weekend of June 20th. The Crimson Tide would love to add him to this class that already has 4-star quarterback Jett Thomalla. Kalen DeBoer and company have over-communicated to all passers that they've targeted this summer that the plan was always to take 2. I think that's very, very notable that, the plan was always to take 2. That was something that we were kind of wondering. How many quarterbacks is Alabama going to land in this class? Seems right now that they're going to get at least 2. Probably not going to get more than that, though. Want to continue to ask you guys, make sure you are subscribed right here to the Alabama Football Report. We will continue to keep you guys updated on all things Alabama football recruiting. We are also trying to set a new record here in the month of July for subscribers. You see in 2023, you see in 2024, we continue to go up and just get better and better and better. Same thing Alabama's trying to do, right? Trying to get better and better every year. 500, maybe the goal for July of 2025. Make sure you guys stay locked in right here to the Alabama Football Report. Hit that sub button for me right now. All right, so Alabama does have some more defensive predictions in here. You have Nolan Wilson, the 4-star defensive lineman, another top 100 guy. He's going to be committing on July 4th. And then Javari Edwards as well, guy that's been trending to Alabama since he took that official visit, back a couple of weeks ago. He's going to be committing on July 5th as well, about 5 p.m. Central Time for Nolan Wilson there, and then 4 p.m.-ish Central Time there for Javari Edwards. Now, if Alabama ends up landing all of those players that we just discussed, they're going to end up having a top 3 recruiting class. I put it through the 247 Sports calculator, and it came out to a score of 290.29 on the 247 Sports calculator. That would have been good for a top 3 recruiting class in the country. And, just considering all the hype that's been going around here with Alabama, with this run that they've been going on with recruiting here, a lot of people, you guys remember last year when, Kalen DeBoer ended up getting hired. You heard it from all the teams out there, whether it was Georgia, whether it was Auburn, whether it was some crazy Alabama fans as well. People were out there calling him Husky Harsin, saying he wasn't going to be able to come in to the SEC, recruit the South. He wasn't going to be able to do those things and build these connections. Well, it looks like they are doing it. So those people that said that about Kalen DeBoer, about Courtney Morgan, those people sound really, really stupid right now. And honestly, when I was going through yesterday, I was scrolling through Twitter right before we went live on our Cowboys show. I saw Paul Finebaum on 3 put an article out there about what Paul Finebaum said, talking about Alabama's recruiting class. I'm going to show you guys exactly what he said here, and then I'm going to give my take on that as well. This is what Paul Finebaum said. He said, quite frankly, this is one of the great recruiting runs that we've seen in some years. It almost feels like Nick Saban is running the ship again when it comes to recruiting, because this is a vintage Alabama. This is vintage Alabama recruiting. I think when we saw that transition 2.5 years ago, I think a lot of people doubted Alabama could come back to this particular moment in time, but it is here, and I think it bodes extremely well for Alabama in the future. One of my buddies sent me this, and the first thing I thought of was somebody should probably tell Paul that we had a top 3 recruiting class last year as well. But I want to hear from you guys before we get into my take here in just a second. What is your one-word reaction to that comment from Paul Finebaum about Alabama's recruiting? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments of today's video. So originally, I got pretty fired up when I heard this and when I saw this article out there. And I read it as Nick Saban is still running the recruiting behind the scenes. And I got really fired up because I was like, look, man, Nick Saban shows up one time in a 2-year span, 1.5 years, whatever it is, and all of a sudden Nick Saban's running the recruiting. And it really did get me fired up, and one thing was funny about that quote as well. He said 2.5 years ago. Well, it hasn't been 2.5 years ago. It's only been 1.5 years. But either way, what I really do think Paul Finebaum meant by this, and this is something that our Cowboys Report host here, Tom Downey, kind of talked me off the ledge here. He said that, he kind of took that as Kalen DeBoer is doing such a good job. It reminds me of the way Nick Saban was recruiting. And when he kind of broke it down like that, I was like, okay, maybe that makes a little bit more sense. But really the way Paul said it, and the fact that Nick Saban was in town for that last official visit weekend on June 20th, it made it sound like Nick Saban was the one behind the scenes, playing, kind of puppeteer when it comes to recruiting. Either way, right now, Alabama is still recruiting at an extremely high level. Kalen DeBoer, Courtney Morgan, Christian Robinson, Nick Sheridan, a guy that, a lot of people don't really want to give credit to because they didn't like how the offense ran last year. Nick Sheridan has really, really been pivotal in Alabama landing some of these offensive players as well. You add Ryan Grubb to that staff. Alabama's coaching staff is really doing a phenomenal job on the recruiting trail, building relationships. And then you also have Courtney Morgan coming in as that closer, talking about the NIL and seeing what he can get some of these guys in terms of that NIL and revenue sharing stuff as well. So a lot of people really need to do some soul searching because this Alabama coaching staff is doing a phenomenal job on the recruiting.